All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thanks for being here. Apologize for the delayed start. Uh, Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Um, yeah, today we're talking about cyber warfare. If this is your first webinar with Tobin Solutions, welcome. Thanks for being here. And if you've been here before, thanks for being here. Thanks for attending. I appreciate it. We're going to be talking a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today here. We're going to set the context of all of this. That's me, by the way. We're going to do a little bit of a security primer here. We want to make sure we're all talking the same fundamental language. And we're going to talk about some of the risks and some of the mitigations, as well as give you guys a chance to answer questions or ask questions rather along the way. So feel free to drop any questions in along the chat. And at the end, we can unmute yourselves as well for that. Before we jump in, the context for today is, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and there's a whole world of politics and things behind that. We're not going to get into that today. We're here to talk about cybersecurity and the impact of the war on cybersecurity. I didn't want to let this go without at least acknowledging the humanitarian tragedy that's going on over there. The death and the suffering is kind of unimaginable. I'm kind of a child of the 80s, and there was a band in the 80s called Nina, I think, and they sang a song called 99 Red Balloons or Left Balloons. And the videos actually and the lyrics are in part about some kids that go buy a bunch of balloons and they release them, and they're mistaken by the military as an attack, and the military is eager to be at war, and they just kind of rush into attacking and attack each other. So in that case, the balloons were a fake, but caused a war. Here we're talking about war and things that aren't so fake. We're going to be talking about real cybersecurity issues, things that are going on now. But like I said, there's a lot of people out there that are suffering. And another interpretation of the song I heard was about the balloons represent people's dreams disappearing in war and where they go. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that before we move on. All right. So what are we talking about when we talk about a security event? Because we're talking about cybersecurity warfare. We're talking about cybersecurity events in the context of warfare. So before we jump in, we want to make sure we're all in the same language here. For us, and for most people in the world of security, it is a breach in your CIA triad, or the CIA triangle is sometimes referred. That is confidentiality, availability, and integrity of your data and systems. So if an unauthorized party gains access to your systems, your resources, or your data, unauthorized, that would be a breach of confidentiality. If you have data that is altered or corrupted by an unauthorized party, or sometimes even an event, that would also be a breach of integrity and a breach of your CIA. And lastly, and people don't always consider this, but really it's a breach of availability. If your systems, your resources and data are not available, that's a security issue. To the extent, kind of depends on you, but if your email is gone for 3 days, that may be a security breach for you, or even if it's gone for an hour. So anything we're talking about here is inside of that. Specifically around cyber warfare, there is, within our US government, we have the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or the CISA, or CISA. And over on the right here, you can see they have a Shields Up website now. Here's what they have to say. Russia's invasion of Ukraine could impact organizations both within and beyond the region, to include the US homeland. Every organization, large and small, must be prepared to respond to disruptive cyber activity. As the nation's cyber defense agency, CISA stands ready to help organizations prepare for, respond to, and mitigate the impact of cyber attacks. So you've all been warned, right? And that's probably why you're here. You might have been seeing some of the things from the government. You might have been seeing some things from the news. Maybe you're just a regular webinar attendee. Maybe you're reading our newsletters. Maybe your insurance company or some of your business partners or critical partners are customers are asking you about your cybersecurity posture, especially in light of what's going on. These links are links to the most recent articles that CISA has put out since the beginning of the year. So there's a lot going on. This last one came out this week, Strengthening Cybersecurity of SATCOM Network Providers and Customers. SATCOM stands for Satellite and Communications. So yeah, we don't know what's going to happen. I don't really know what's going to happen with Russia and Ukraine and cybersecurity and cyber warfare and all that. But we know there's lots of vulnerability out there, tremendous vulnerability, tremendous risk in the systems, tremendous amounts of people that are either ignoring, ignorant, think they've got it together. There's a lot of risk in the system. Some of these systems are very old, which might be in their favor. Some of them were designed before security was even put in place, really thinking about cybersecurity. So the landscape is deep and wide, and there's a lot of risk out there. And really, most of what we're talking about today, if you've attended any of our security webinars, is not risk we haven't talked about before in one form or another. And the good thing is around this, in many cases, for some of the concerns we have around cyber warfare, if you're doing some of the things we've been talking about around cybersecurity, you've already on the road to protecting yourself and preparing for it. So the landscape is rough. Attacks are up. Depending on what statistics you're seeing, attacks are up 50-fold, 100-fold, 400-fold, because the attacks are always going on. We've always been attacked by Russia. We've always been attacked by China and North Korea and the kid with a laptop sitting in a coffee shop in some other country. And the United States does it. We attack others too. It's just part of this thing that's been going on. And not everybody's thinking about it or talking about it. They definitely are now, because the stakes are even bigger, right? How far and wide is the Russia-Ukraine conflict going to get, and who's going to get dragged into it, and how bad is it going to be? I have no idea. That part, I'm not an expert in affairs of state. I just know it's possible should they decide to do something kooky, or we decide to do something kooky, or somebody decides to do something kooky, because we're kind of in that world at the moment. Who are these people? Really, we talk about the technology and the hackers and the computers, but really behind all of it, it's people. And we call them threat actors. These are the people and organizations that are doing the attacks. They're after something. Who knows what? Could be money, could be fame, could be revenge, could be to make a statement. This is not a new slide, by the way. We've been talking about this for a while. These actors have been around for a while in different forms. And the problem is with this, and this is why it's kind of so scary from a cybersecurity standpoint, is, when you used to think about war, it was like, okay, well, I guess we'll have to, we can put a submarine off their coast and launch missiles, or, land tanks and things on the beach and do all of that. Now, literally, it could be somebody sitting with a computer at a coffee shop, could be launching and monitoring and maintaining an attack. Coffee shop could be anywhere in the world, and it could be anybody. It could be somebody who has a state-sponsored. Could be Russia attacking us attacking Russia, Russia attacking Poland. Who knows? Could be cyber terrorism. There's hacktivism going on, right? It may not be Russia that attacks us as a nation state, but it might be someone inside of Russia who doesn't like America, or vice versa. I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of this. I'm using those as examples, but all of this goes both ways. There could be someone in the United States. Maybe they're a Ukraine citizen. Maybe they just love Ukraine. Who knows what? Maybe they just hate Putin. I have no idea. And they can do the same thing. They can launch these. Now, again, these are more sophisticated attacks we're talking about. There's big money, big brains behind these things. But once the issues are discovered and people know how to do this, it's not that hard to execute it without a lot of sophisticated knowledge and resources. You don't need these big $100 billion military budgets to do these. But believe me, they are spending hundreds and billions of dollars now attacking us, and us them. But this is the part that's kind of scary, right? Like these hacktivists. We might be able to try and have some kind of a diplomatic conversation with another state or think about things at a bigger state. A hacktivist who just has a grudge or a moral or whatever ethics or whatever it is that they want to, why they're getting involved in this, and they can do it anonymously, they could start World War III. We'd have no idea. This is going to be a bit of a scary slide. So grab your seat and get ready for the ride. First thing we want to make sure is that your cyber and business interruption insurance is handled. Some of you I know are just getting it. Some of you are renewing it. Some of you are thinking about it. We just got a client that has their renewal. It came with a 6-page questionnaire on their cybersecurity profile. These insurance companies are now, and some have been, and now even more, are requiring that they're not just going to insure you blindly. They want to know that you're doing the right things, that you're putting in the right technologies, that you're following the right policies, that you're thinking about these things. So in red, I say need to follow the policy provisions. This is where you want to review your policy. Talk to your insurance company or talk to us or whoever your IT provider is and say, look at our policy. Are we meeting these provisions? Because if we're not, we may not get covered. So we want to make sure you're going to be covered. And in bold, in 2017, Mondelez International suffered $100 million in damages from NotPetya. NotPetya was a Russian attack. They attacked a number of different groups. I don't think it was a nation state, but did come out of Russia. But they declared it as such. So when the government said this is an act of war, suddenly the insurance companies had a place to stand in those clauses on the very last page of their contracts that talk about acts of war and other acts of God and other things where they don't have to do anything. I don't know where this stands right now, but I don't know what your insurance companies are going to do if we really get hit. What I think is going to happen is that last point that I added with the handout. I suspect the insurance companies are not going to pay out, and the destruction is going to be so catastrophic, someone's going to pay, and that's going to be you and I through government bailouts and federal emergency funds, is my guess. But I don't know. If the big banks are taken down in some kind of a big interruption and it's causing widespread catastrophe and businesses are being shut down for weeks because they can't transact business, it's probably going to be not unlike some of the shutdown with COVID in that. There's just going to be such a wide impact that someone's going to have to stand up and do it, or maybe not have to. I guess that's a political discussion, but we know it's going to happen. So anyway, this is, again, check your insurance. Get it, verify what's there, and make sure you're at least meeting the requirements of it. When we talk about requirements, these are some of the minimum best practices. And there may be more, but we think this is a pretty good plan, and this matches what most experts are saying, since they have no idea if you're going to be safe or not in the future either. They're saying, let's at least start getting the groundwork laid. First of all, you want an internal security champion. You don't want to abdicate this. You don't want to just assume someone's got it handled. You don't necessarily need to know how to do it, but you've got to have someone that's very interested in doing it. We're your champions to help you make sure this happens. We partner up with you, but it's hard to push against a rope. So we want someone internally that really sees the value of this and is willing to work with us to make things happen. We talked about cyber liability insurance already. You want to have verified off-site data backups that are secure. You want to be doing regular patching and updates of your software. You want a firewall with advanced detection. You want advanced workstation and server malware detection and response, otherwise known as EDR. You want great anti-spam, anti-phishing. You want multi-factor authentication everywhere, not just with your email and not just with your bank, but logging in at your workstation, logging into your VPN. Everywhere means everywhere. You want secure remote access, because so much remote access is happening now with work from home and remote workers and all of that. We really recommend a security assessment because we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know, and those are blind spots. So we can tell you certain things about your environment, especially if we're your provider, but there's just some things we're not going to know until we go out and really look. So we recommend you do that. We recommend you train your people about security awareness and that you put together a security incident response plan. You do all 12 of these things, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape for many types of disasters that might befall you. Now, if they take out our electricity grid for weeks on end, we had a microcosm of that in Texas last spring, right? When they had the storms and their power was out for a week. So we know what that's like in certain areas and the impact of that. So I don't know, we can do all of these things. If the power's out, the power's out for months. Most of us don't have that kind of energy to keep things running. You might have a battery backup that's going to run for a bit, but even the data centers are eventually going to need power. They might have generators. We know what it's like for them to run certain amounts of time. I don't know what would be right for them to run months on end, or that's even something that's going to happen. So like I said, there's these bigger things. This is like every nightmare like scenario movie you watch where the hackers are doing something and hacking in and turning things on and destruction and all of that comes to mind when all of these things happen. How likely is that? I don't know. I think that gets into the world of the mutually assured destruction. If they do that to us, we're going to do that to them, and it's just going to be bad on all sides. And maybe that's why it hasn't happened yet. Not sure, but doesn't mean they're not going to try and mess with us along the way. I want to talk more about that security assessment. We've been talking to some clients about the security assessment, and there's a lot of things we know about your system. We can just tell you certain things we know we're doing for you or not doing for you, and we know what the impact of those are. But what we don't know is what your contracts say. What we don't know is what your insurance says. What we don't know is, if somebody brought a printer in from home, or at home and is using a printer that isn't secure. There's a lot of things we don't know, and until we go in and do those assessments, that's the only really way to be sure. So in the prior slide, I talked about those minimum security standards. You do that, you're going to be in really great shape. The problem is, without an assessment, we have to be able to do what we just said, those 12 steps, but do it across your entire environment. If there's something we're not aware of, we can't impact it. So that's why we want to do the assessment. We have to look at everything. It's the best way to be really protected. So we recommend that. We're finding blind spots. People talk about like how, if Russia did do cyber warfare against us, so I'm just going to use them as an example, but because that's what really is the impetus for today's conversation, and we have specific warnings against them. But like I said, it could be from anybody. How do they do that? One of the ways is through a supply chain attack. That is where they compromise third-party software. They do something, right? You have your computer and you've got the software installed on your computer. You've got your smartphone and all the software installed on your smartphone and your server and your cloud services. All of that is made up of dozens or hundreds of different manufacturers, publishers, people, some existing, some not anymore. And anywhere along the way, we call that the supply chain of your software. If something gets in the middle of that, and let's say, let's give you a real example here. 2019, SolarWinds is a software company that makes software that companies like Tobin Solutions use. We don't use SolarWinds, thankfully, but we use others, and we have no reason to believe those won't someday befall an attack like this. But what happened with SolarWinds specifically, starting in 2019, is we believe that Russia infiltrated SolarWinds as an organization, put in malicious edits into their software code. And what you want to know is this code is used to manage the workstations and networks. So by default, it has rights and privileges of an administrator to do everything. They infiltrated the code. And then what happens? Code gets updated. SolarWinds software is no different than Microsoft Word or Windows or your browser or any other software that gets periodically updated for new features or for security reasons. And what happens when it gets updated? It updates and pushes out the software to everybody. Well, look who got impacted. Pretty small font. Office of the President of the United States, the Secret Service, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard, the State Department, the Federal Reserve, NASA, the NSA, the CDC. It goes on. That's just the private sector, or the public sector. Then we have AT&T, MasterCard, Visa, Credit Suisse, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin, McDonald's. By the way, that third to last bullet point, FireEye, that was a security company. They found it, but they were already attacked. They found the attack, but it already happened. So it got past all of their defenses that they already had in place. Let that sink in. A very well-respected security company, FireEye, was attacked by this. All of their defenses, they eventually found it. But it was in already. So maybe this is why now I want you to get, probably there's someone in Russia right now getting a webinar from their local IT security company, and they've got a list of all the places where the US has infiltrated, probably. I could also do a list like this, not just for Russia, but probably for China, North Korea, where we've attacked them and where they've attacked us. It's going on. There's a whole cyber war that's been going on. But it's any wonder, maybe this is that mutually assured destruction, right? That was the what do they call that? The doctrine behind our nuclear war posture. They've got nukes, we've got nukes. No one's going to be stupid enough to launch because we're all just going to die. Maybe that's why we haven't really seen these huge, huge attacks yet. As far as being successful, they're happening. It's kind of crazy. So, but again, a hacktivist who maybe isn't as concerned about their boat, you know, what are they, those oligarchs and those huge mega yachts that are being seized and things like that. You know, maybe it's the oligarch. They hire some hackers to go take down the Federal Reserve because they're ticked off that their boat got taken. I have no idea, but it's all possible because you don't need a submarine off the coast launching missiles anymore. And by the way, they're still dealing with the SolarWinds attack because the only way to really deal with an attack effectively and really ensure you're in good shape is to wipe everything clean and reinstall everything. We're talking about tens of thousands of computers and systems and people to do this, and the disruption. I have no idea if any data centers are going to be bombed by Russia or Ukraine or whoever, wherever things happen. This one happened to be a fire that happened at a data center at OVH. They're the largest data center in Europe and the third largest in the world. Now, this happened to be a battery fire. Could be a missile, could be a bomb, could be just somebody, you know, setting a battery on fire. I'm not saying this was part of the attack. What I'm saying is data centers, because people have this myth that I'm in the cloud, so I'm okay. Well, guess where the cloud lives? Data centers. So when this happened, some websites were completely offline and never came back because they had all their eggs in one basket in one data center. So that's something you got to worry about. Kaseya, that was another supply chain attack. In this case, they distributed ransomware to everybody. And it took 3 months, 3 months for some people to get their data back. I'm sorry, 1 month to get their data back. Very long time. And I don't know that everyone hasn't gotten their data. There might be some people that still haven't. It's possible. I go look. So we've talked about products, and there are these products you buy. But much like you buy a lock for your house, the lock does not provide security. It's turning the lock, for your house. It's jiggling the door before you leave. It's turning back when you are about to hit the freeway for your family vacation and can't remember if you locked the door or not, or close the garage door. That's a process. And that's really where you want to be focusing on security. Government had technology in place. They had products. FireEye that discovered the solar winds. They had products. It's the process where something got failed. Today, we've talked about cyber liability insurance. The next thing, and this is really today's focus, is business continuity and disaster recovery. Because again, we have no idea the extent to which a cyber war could impact us. Could it take us down for a couple hours? Could it take down someone that's important to us, like our bank, or our power, or our Netflix? But you have to know that your stuff's going to work because you are responsible for backing up your data and your systems. And while you may have a backup solution, until you've really tested it and gone through the exercise of testing it and even thinking about what it would be like to run your business while systems are down and being recovered, you may have a huge expectations crisis when the time comes. So in red, and this is for people, like I said, we need an internal champion around security. This is what the internal champion's job is to say, hey, my number one priority is to inspect our disaster recovery solution. So we're talking about business continuity and disaster recovery, BC and DR. Business continuity is a plan to keep your business running while your systems are down. If it takes a day to get your systems back up and running, or Microsoft goes under attack with their email and they're down for 2 days, what are you going to do? Don't know. Maybe you know. Maybe your team doesn't know, but you want to be thinking about that plan. Then while you're actively running your business while systems are down, that's where disaster recovery comes in. That's that plan to get your systems back online and running after the disaster. This is just really the minimum. And when I say minimum, I say minimum because we still have some people we see once in a while or new clients we pick up where they did not follow this and they had a risk they were not aware of, but just a minimum of 3 backups. And this is bare minimum, please. We want to go much further, but you want to have at least 3 copies of your data. And by the way, a cyber war isn't going to just impact your business. It might impact your personal life. It might impact your church or the nonprofit board you sit on. So please map this conversation onto your whole life. You know, what are your grandparents doing about backing up their photos, right? 3-2-1 backup rule, 3 copies. The primary copy, that's the original, and then at least 2 other copies, one on some other media and one that is off-site, air-gapped, and even offline maybe. Things are getting so serious right now. We're going to be including options for true offline, take a hard drive, back up everything, unplug it completely as an extra belt and suspenders. That's that air-gapped offline. There was a lot of people use cloud storage and they're like, hey, Jeremy, I got my data all backed up in the cloud. And I'm like, that's great, but the cloud can be under attack. And in fact, not a cyber attack, a large cloud provider just had a data loss, permanent data loss, because someone made a mistake in configuring something. So even though the backup was off-site, air-gapped into the cloud, still lost data. So here's a real rough idea. This is a great place to have a conversation. Get your leadership team together, get your IT partner together with you, and just start this conversation. You don't have to do it all in one shot, but it is a kind of a step-by-step process. And it's pretty straightforward, but you know, the devil's in the details. But this is it. You just start to go through this 7-step process to develop your business continuity and disaster recovery plan and strategy. We can help you with this. You guys can start it on your own. But we really recommend you start thinking about this now. And it's not just about IT. What if you're, who did I just hear? One of our clients, who's also a colleague, mentioned something. He went home and had like some kind of electronic garage door opener, and that was it. And the power was out. Couldn't get into his garage or his house. That's how he got into his house. So you never know what's going to happen with this stuff. So it's like you want to start thinking about what are the. That's a real simple thing here. But what if it's your office? Can't get into your loading dock. Facebook had a huge issue. When was that? 9 months ago, where their security got bollocksed up, and all their Facebook security was actually integrated into their door and access system, so people couldn't get in. I guarantee they did not walk through that process and see what would happen. Had they tested that, they would have discovered that. So one of the things these champions, and the business owners and stakeholders need to decide is you need to tell us what your expectations are, because every business has different needs and expectations. And the first thing is the MTD, your maximum tolerable downtime. This is like the worst of the worst. We got tornadoes happening today. We've had Texas last year. We've got cyber warfare with, every day they're coming out and warning people, be prepared. Be prepared. Every business, whether it's you or maybe it's just someone in your bank or the shipping company you use or who knows what. We already have lots of issues with supply chain interruptions. That can happen. Whatever it's going to be, the impact on your business, you want to decide what your maximum tolerable downtime is. In the worst case scenario, if you're like, hey, we can put together a business continuity plan that can have us working with our clients in a sufficient capacity for up to 3 days. But after that, we need our systems back. If our systems aren't online after 3 days, the impact is going to be so big. You have to tell us what that is, because we designed the system around that. That's in the worst case scenario. People are like, hey, if you called me up and you were my vendor for something and you're like, hey, Jeremy, I know I needed to get you those things today or next week, but we got hit with cyber warfare and Russia attacked us. And I'm like, hey, sorry about that. It's gonna take a few more days. Okay, great. I can understand that. Or it's a big thing, right? Because I'll be struggling with the same thing. Power's out, affecting the whole city. I might not really care too much. But fortunately, although more common and maybe really scary as what could happen and what we're talking about, those types of disasters are not befalling our clients every week. Most of the time, it's something lesser than that. It's a hardware issue, an internet outage, a piece of hardware breaks, maybe some ransomware, but if they're protected, they can recover pretty quickly. Those are the more typical things. That's a different number. You might say, hey, Jeremy, if the sky's falling, 2 weeks, I can handle that. But for most things, I want to be up and running within like 4 hours or 8 hours. Great. Now we know that. We make sure we design a system and test a system that's going to match your MTD and RTO. And we got one more number coming at you, your RPO. That's the point in time prior to a disruption and how far back you need to go. We have some people, we know that they just have 7 days of backups. So what they're saying is anything older 7 days, they can tolerate losing. Or if the attack, I said SolarWinds was 2019, they didn't discover it until they'd been in for a few months. So if their backups didn't go back that far, you may not be able to recover, right? If their backups were 7 days and the attack happened 30 days earlier, you can't go back to a point in time before the attack, before the infection. So what does this really look like? All boiled down to one simple slide. Security event. Russia, United States decides to take a stronger uh, approach to Russia, Ukraine, and Russia decides to attack our banking system, right? That's one of the fears, the security event. Or, because this is really more personal to you, Russia decides to attack the bank using an army of zombie bot computers, and your network happens to be one of those computers that's turned into a zombie bot to attack the bank. Or one of these hacktivists is trying to raise money to send to their organization of choice, and they want to get ransom from you to send the money. Who knows? Whatever that security event is, the time starts ticking. Minutes, hours, days, forwards, backwards, that's where we're looking. This is what it looks like for your RTO and MTD. Where does the recovery start? And where does it end? And that's it. So we sit down and have a conversation with this. We'll put some actual numbers behind this, and then make sure there's a system in place that will meet this. This is another great place to sit down and have a conversation. One of the potential types of attacks that we're worried about is people grabbing data, blackmailing, extortion, taking sensitive information. So you want your backups and all your data to be encrypted where you need it. That's also part of this. Sometimes the backups themselves are being attacked because they're not encrypted. You want to make sure you're covering everything. This is why we do those security assessments. We're not just talking about your on-premise systems. We're not just talking about your hosted systems or your workstations. What about what's up in Microsoft 365 or G Suite? What about what's in SharePoint or Teams or your calendar? Microsoft is backing up your system at one level, but you have what's called a shared responsibility with your data. You're ultimately responsible for your data, not Microsoft. So there's solutions out there to back up Microsoft. What happens if their email's down? What if they're the attack? If I were Russia, that'd be a place I'd attack. Or if I was somebody, why not attack where everything is? Go to Google, go to Microsoft. They're the big players. Go to Amazon. That's going to impact a lot of people, right? So if you haven't got a solution to back up when Microsoft is down, then that means your email is going to be down until Microsoft sorts that out. What about your website? What if your website links to your CRM and Facebook, and it's got a password in there? Is that password good? Is it doing it the right way? Is it secure? Don't know, but that's why you want to be looking. You've got to do this assessment. We can do the best practices. What I gave you with that list before is a list of best practices. And if you do all that, you're going to be in really great shape, but almost certainly there's going to be a blind spot somewhere. To the extent that blind spot is leveraged and used, who knows? But we at least want to try to get a good shot at knowing where those blind spots are and then closing them off. Your cloud services. A lot of you are using these different cloud services that are like specific to your business, right? A little project management system, a type of an accounting system. Where are those hosted? What are they doing? What if they're down? What about your phones, your physical sphere? It goes on and on. But you want to be looking at these things because any one of these, you almost need to be thinking about them and compartmentalize these each as you develop your business continuity and DR plan, because it might have different types of plans and prioritizing, right? You may not care if your website's down. That could be down for 2 weeks, but your email, that might need to be, needs to be up now. We really, really recommend testing. If we don't test, we really have no idea. Now, a lot of these systems, they have some basic built-in checks. It'll tell you if it thinks it backed up successfully. It'll show a green check mark. It may even do some other verifications. And those are all good and important. And certainly if it says it failed there, you want to go investigate something that failed there. But until we've really tested it, we have no idea how long it's going to take. We have no idea whether it's going to really work and meet your needs and what your MTD and RPO and RTO is that we talked about earlier. We have no idea where they're going to get your systems running. We need to have a disaster recovery plan. We need to make sure it's up to date, that it's tested. It's the only way to verify. And like I said, this is your number one priority, is testing this. You want to be doing this now or get it on your list to be next. We are doing these regularly and we are finding things. Sometimes big, sometimes little. But we want to find them so we can do something about it. Otherwise, it's a big blind spot. This takes something. There's a cost to this, it can be expensive depending on what the scope of the test is going to be. We get it. But we really want you to be clear. There's many times where we have gone to, over the years, Tobin Solutions is in its 25th year of business, in a quarter century, where we have tried to restore things from floppy disks, from hard drives, from tapes, from the cloud. And by and large, it often works. But there are times where it doesn't. Something goes amiss. And even though it said the backup was successful, so again, until you test it, you're not going to know. There's some technical elements of a backup solution. You've got to get the data backed up. You want to be talking to your provider. Is my data backed up on-site, off-site, and air-gapped? Air-gapped meaning that if they attack your computers, they can't use your attack on those computers to then go launch an attack on your backup solution. That's what the air-gap means. If it's air-gap, in theory, they can't do that. Although in Iran some years ago, they air-gapped the mechanical centrifuges that were reprocessing uranium. And they had those systems air-gapped. Well, we believe it was the US and maybe Israel created something called Stuxnet and was able to get that Stuxnet onto via air-gap. I think they said somehow they copied it to a flash drive and they moved a flash drive between systems and infected those control systems for the centrifuges and made them report that they were spinning at normal speeds when in fact they were spinning out of control. You want mirror images of everything, not just your data, because the data is great. That's critical. But we need your databases. We need your software license keys. We need the servers. There's a lot of configuration. So we really need everything imaged. And then we can talk about where things get spun up in your data center, if you're in a local recovery. This gets into like what your disaster recovery solution looks like. If you're mainly using stuff in the cloud and your disaster recovery solution looks one way. If you're an engineering company or graphic design firm and you've got big graphics files that you need to be running locally because for performance, it's going to look different. You're going to have a different kind of a solution. It's important to figure out exactly what your needs are. If someone's coming to you with a cookie cutter approach, it's going to provide some value, but likely it's going to miss something in the blind spots. They're not digging into what you really need. Again, might be missing a blind spot. The other piece of this, so after we do the testing, we come up with what's called the playbook. Remember that picture before, the star happens, the security event, time starts ticking. What's the first action? Grab the playbook. Start calling the people who are in the playbook. Call the president of the company, call your insurance company, call Tobin Solutions. What are those phone numbers? Do you have a copy of your playbook or is it stored on your server that's now encrypted? Print off your playbook. Keep a copy at home. Who's on the team? Who's going to get called? What's the plan? This is not the time to be creating the plan on the fly. This is, if we've done it before, and if we've got to build the engine while we're flying the plane, we do it, but it is a bumpy experience. If we can plan ahead, much greater likelihood of success, much greater likelihood of calm, clear heads prevailing. But we've got to have that playbook that tells How do we restore your servers? How do we reactivate that license key? How do we, get your people connected? Whatever that looks like, that whole test, that is all part of that recovery point objective. So if you say, hey, we want a recovery point objective of 8 hours, and we're like, great, we design a solution, looks like it's going to do 8 hours, and we go to execute it, and we find out, oh, it really took 12 hours. Okay. So now we need to adjust expectations or adjust the solution. Not a problem, but no longer a blind spot. We are committed to no blind spots. We can't tell you what to do. We can certainly advise you what to do. We can't force you what to do. But our commitment is you at least are knowing what there's out there and what risk you have and what your next actions are. At least that's what we do with our customers. So this process is important. We recommend you at least do it yearly and really test it out. This isn't just restoring a file. Restoring a file is not bad, but it really doesn't capture what's needed to really verify everything's working. Like we did one recently for a client. We brought up all of their servers in a virtual infrastructure. They came in through remote access. They logged into their accounting system in this virtual infrastructure that was outside of their current production infrastructure, ran reports, tested things to see that things looked okay, and current data. Like that. Peace of mind. Get to sleep well at night knowing you've got a good playbook. Yeah, this is it. If you're really concerned about cyber warfare, again, I cannot tell you what to do about if they attack our power grid or if they, hack our banks or interrupt our food supply or, who knows what. If they come for you directly, if you're somehow related to the conflict, you might have some special concerns to worry about. If you've got some clients or business partners that are directly related to the conflict, you may have some extra concerns about. But most of us are just kind of concerned about getting swept into it, right? Swept up into something we didn't expect. We can't predict the future. There's always going to be what we didn't expect in the sense of, what's Russia going to do next? I have no idea. But regardless of whether it's cyber warfare, regardless of whether it's ransomware, regardless of whether it's a tornado, regardless it's a bad lightning storm, regardless of whether it's your internal person who you ticked off and they had a grudge and it's we don't know where it's coming from. So, but it's all the same kind of thing to think about. All of those situations, you want to inspect it. Sandra says it all sounds terrific, but sometimes for smaller companies, the research not be able. I hear what you're saying, Sandra. And I guess what I would say to that is it's a journey and you want to do what you can. You might be able to do some small things now. I get there's budgets. There's certainly teams available. There's people that can do it, but there are budgets and security is expensive. But we recommend to at least start somewhere and create that future. If you can start implementing some of these technologies, maybe you just implement multi-factor authentication on your email and you haven't done that yet. That may be a small project, that may take something, but you know what? It might be really worth spent because then you'll at least protect that. So I don't know, that's worth a conversation, Sandra, but yeah, it does take something. I'm very clear about that. Most of our clients do not go to 0 to 60 on this stuff in 5 seconds. Some of these things are implementing over the course of months or years. So, and again, even if you go in and look and you find out your disaster recovery isn't where you want it to be, better to know that now. I'd rather know than not know. So it's kind of scary, and take a few deep breaths. Again, if you've been to these things before, a lot of this technology is, while it does cost something, is very accessible. And a lot of you are already doing a lot of the things on here. I see a lot of the names that are there, and I know what some of you are doing. But not everybody's doing it. So if you've got any further questions about this, or what's a plan you can put in that can have you start to chip away at this and start to protect yourself, or maybe you've got the nonprofit board you sit on, or your church, or whoever else you think might have a useful conversation around this. I'm open to that. We'd like to spread the word about it, and again, just make sure people don't have those blind spots so that they can at least start to get into action on what it is they need to do, even if it's just telling their team to start being on the lookout. So thank you very much for being here today. Like I said, it's a scary topic. The human tragedy is awful, and the risk is real. And so thanks for being here and listening to this. Hopefully if you're not in action, you'll get into action in some way, even if it's just to put something on your calendar to take that next action. That would be a great place to start. They say if you want a tree, the best time to have planted it is 20 years ago, and the next best time is to plant it today. So let's plant that tree on security and keep things moving. I'll be around for any questions. Look forward to our next webinar with you. Please all be safe, be well, and if you're on spring break, enjoy spring break. Thank you.